are thinking that are pressing Africa at this time? So what are the very clear and sound measures that your administration is going to take to address them?
Please tell us your name and where you're from.
Mr. Selassie from Ocean Television.
Okay, thank you. Repeat the question, please, and a bit slowly so that we can all get you.
Okay. You've been telling us about the challenge that you think Africa is facing at this time. So what are the sound and clear and specific measures that you are going to take to address them?
The challenges that Africa is facing and what are the actions we can take to overcome these challenges. That's your question. Thank you for that. Let's give the microphone now to AFP. Okay.
Is there somebody for me?
Sorry, I said we take one question, we get an answer, then we take the next one. I'm not rewriting that. So let's give the candidate time to answer that question. What the challenges that he has identified that Africa is facing, what are the solutions to those challenges?
Well, so the challenges are many, as you've seen. I think the solution one is to try to promote unity among the African countries. Unity is a prerequisite to development generally. So we want to first ensure that African countries can speak with one voice, that they are united. And this unity begins first at home. To try to work with the government of the African Union to ensure that there is harmony and peace within the countries. Peace is very important, prerequisite to development. Areas where there is conflict, we want to ensure that these conflicts are brought to an end and that people can concentrate on the task of nation building in those countries. Secondly, we've got these regional groupings, what we call RECs, the East African Community, the SADC, ECOWAS, and Maghreb, and so on. We want to ensure that these regional groupings actually work properly and harmoniously, because they are the building blocks of African unity, Pan-African unity, so that whatever we are doing can be implemented through these regional groupings. I'll give you an example. You've got the issues like the issue of infrastructure mentioned. And I have been fortunate to have been the High Representative of AU on infrastructure. AU has got ambitious program, what is called PIDA, a program for infrastructure development in Africa. And they've identified several projects like the Pan-African highways. Secondly, the African high-speed railway network. Then we've got the energy program across the continent. Then we've got transport, air transport, and also water transport. And then there's fiber optic connections between the capitals of the continent. Now, each of these infrastructure programs have got what they call the champions, headed by a president, champions in them. But most of those projects have not moved. Most of them have not moved. If you take, for example, the inter-African highways, there's Cape to Cairo, and then there's Tunis to the Cape, and then there is Dakar through Bamako, Khartoum to Djibouti. You've got Dakar to Lagos, Lagos to Mombasa. Then you've got the rail network from Beira in Mozambique to Lubito in Angola, and branching to Walvis Bay in Namibia. You would say that the high-speed rail network coming from Lagos, going through Cotonou, Benin, Lomé, in Togo, Accra, in Ghana, Abidjan, in Côte d'Ivoire, Freetown, going to Conakry, going all the way to Rabat, to Algiers, Tunis, to Cairo. Lagos to Cairo. Then you've got Lapset, the Lamu Port in Kenya, going through Juba, Bangui in Central African Republic, to Kribi in the Cameroon port, which links the Atlantic Ocean and the Indian Ocean and opens up the landlocked countries within the continent to rail transport. You've got water transport along the rivers, the Congo, the Nile, from Lake Victoria to Atlantic. All those are there, but they're just on paper. They are not being implemented. So, why are they not being implemented? That is the question that we need to answer, so that these projects can be implemented. There is open skies. This is the air transport across the continent. That makes it easier. Without effective ground infrastructure, air transport is an intermediate way of moving people and goods. Yet even there is a bureaucracy. Each and every country has got its own air traffic control system. So to fly the airspace of a country, you need permission from the National Air Traffic Control Authority. And they are not properly coordinated so that that permit can be issued within 1 hour. You can take 2 or 3 days to get the permits to fly. And even the commercial airlines that are flying are having to pay a lot of fees. You're charging somebody who's flying the air and you've done nothing in that air. It's just transiting. It's stupid, because it makes it very expensive for travelers. Air transport in Africa is more expensive than it is in Europe. This is, for example, low-hanging fruits that can be harvested very easily and quickly. So I'm saying that, to answer your question, there are challenges and there are solutions. Why are we not using the solutions to deal with the challenges? Okay? So that is not for me to answer. I'm saying that I have an answer. If I'm given an opportunity to come and sit here, I will be able to move the organization to getting solutions to these problems. Thank you.
Thank you so much. The second question, AFP, please.
Jalango, AFP, Asante Sana Baba. There is currently growing tension between Ethiopia and Somalia regarding the signing of a MOU between Ethiopia and Somaliland. What is your stance and what is your opinion on this issue? Asante Sana.
Thank you.
Well, the tensions exist between several countries. There's tension between Ethiopia and Eritrea. There's tension between Ethiopia and Egypt. There's tension between Ethiopia and Somalia because of the Somaliland and so on. My view is that where there's a problem, there's a solution. There's a solution. The solution is basically getting people together to have a conversation and negotiations so that these problems can be solved. I don't see any other way of doing it. I'm sure that we'll be able to solve these problems. Thank you.
Thank you. Third question, there is a gentleman from Citizen. I think he's waited for too long. Sorry. Thank you for your kindness.
Thank you very much. Right Honorable Raila Odinga. My name is Seth Olale from Citizen TV Kenya. Mine would be, Right Honorable, how do you intend to navigate through the geopolitics of Africa, of the continent, in securing your candidacy? You have, like you mentioned in your speech, you have the Francophones, you have the Arabic nations, you have the SADC, and then you have EAC, not forgetting the Horn of Africa. How do you intend to navigate through that?
You see, some of these problems artificially created. Because, when Africa was fighting for independence, there's a lot of unity. You see, for example, Dar es Salaam became the headquarters of the liberation of Southern Africa. You find the Mozambican Frelimo at their camp there around Bagamoyo. The ANC were around Morogoro and so on. They have been supported easily. Before that, you find that a number of South Africans who are going to Europe, escaping the apartheid, were getting their travel documents in Dar es Salaam. I myself, because the colonialists could not give me a passport because of my father's involvement in the liberation struggle, I was taken to Dar es Salaam and I got my travel document from Nyerere. And that's how I went to Europe. And for 3 years, I was living in Europe as a Tanganyikan and later on as a Tanzanian. I only got my Kenyan passport in 1965. In Cairo, President Gamal Abdel Nasser put up a secretariat for the liberation movement of Africa. There are all these liberation movements, ANC, the Communist Party of South Africa, Frelimo, the Congress of Malawi, the MPLA Angola, the SWAPO of now Namibia, KANU of Kenya, all had the offices in Cairo. And that is where they are coordinating support for liberation movement and all those countries. Nkrumah had set up a center in Ghana where most of these people living in exile. Mugabe was a teacher in Ghana. A number of Mozambican leaders were there in Ghana. People like Bill Konangi was working there in Ghana at that time. John Padden, many people. So Africa was then very united during that period. There was no Arab Africa, there was no Franco-Africa, there was no Anglo-Africa. The support was universal across the continent. Those founding fathers, Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea, Modibo Keïta of Mali, Léopold Senghor of Senegal, Kwame Nkrumah, Ghana, Nnamdi Azikiwe, Nigeria, Ahmed Ben Bella, Algeria, Gamal Abdel Nasser, Egypt, Haile Selassie, Ethiopia, Mwalimu Nyerere, Tanzania, Jomo Kenyatta in Kenya. Those were Pan-Africanists at that time. So they were never thinking about themselves as coming from these colonial states. They are seeing themselves as Africans first. And I'm sure that we are able to recreate that spirit of Pan-Africanism that will unite Africans irrespective of their ethnicity, of their colonial heritage, or of their linguistic heritage, but that they are Africans. First and foremost, be Africans. It will be Afrophone, not Lusophone, Francophone, Arabophone, Anglophone. This is my position. It is possible to unite African people and think first and foremost as Africans. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. We had a freelancer, yes, on that table.
Thank you, Mr. Prime Minister. As you said, much of the population of the continent are under 35, and you're giving us names that a majority of us don't no longer identify. I mean, it's history. You're running for a position that should look ahead. For instance, you know, if you walk into the African Union headquarters, much of the work of the African Union is funded by the European Union, including the peacekeeping that's happening in Somalia. The building itself is built by the Chinese. You talk about all kinds of things you say that should be done in the continent. How do you want to pay for it? How should the leadership, or under you or the other candidates, be able to pay for it and embrace an idea that's independent, financially self-sufficient than the status quo at the moment? And my second question is, we're seeing uprising happening in this continent. In your country, it's happening in Mozambique. What are these young people telling the African leadership? Thank you.
Thank you. First, I'm giving you history because history is important in any development. You cannot develop without history. That's where we come from. But I'm saying you want to live in history. You are living for the future. But because of history, we don't want to repeat the mistakes which you have made in the past. We want to use it to inform what we want to do going forward. Yes, it is true that currently the bigger portion of the budget of the AU is funded by European Union, other countries. Now, that is also historical. But you ask yourself, why should that be the case? Who is funding the European Union? The European Union is funding itself. The member states of the European Union fund the European Union. Why is it that EU should be depending on foreign funding for its operations? That is, again, a question that needs to be answered by the leadership of the continent. I'm saying that we can be able to mobilize our resources within our continent to fund our development. But countries will contribute on the basis of the benefit they get from the organization. If it is just a dead-end investment, most countries should not see the need. But if they see that AU is doing something that is beneficial to themselves, I'm sure that most African countries will be willing to fund the activities of the AU. That is my view. Now, yes, the youth, I mentioned that the African youth is vibrant, and African youth needs to be challenged. African youth needs to be empowered. If African youth is empowered, it will become a source for wealth creation in our country. There are countries similar to Africa. You see, you need the economies of scale. There are some countries which are just too small in terms of population to be able to benefit from demography. But if they come together, then they will have the benefits of the economies of scale. You look at China. China's population is almost the same like African population today. China first China spent a lot of resources in manpower development. They developed a highly skilled manpower, the youth of China. So that when they liberalized their economy, they opened it up, China became a very, very attractive investment destination. So most of the European manufacturers saw one, highly skilled and cheap labor. Two, they also saw a cheap source of raw materials. And that's why they rushed to China. You look at these automobile manufacturers, Mercedes, BMW, VW, Peugeot, Citroën, Volvo, Ford, Nissan, Toyota, Hyundai, they're all in China. All manufactured in China and they're exporting to the rest of the world. Just irrespective of China's economic, and political philosophy, they rush to China and produce in China. Why can they come to Africa? The cheap materials that they are rushing for in China is made with raw materials from Africa. China imports bauxite from Africa to make aluminium products. It imports iron ore, copper ore from Africa to go and make copper cables, copper products, to go and make steel products in China. And they're still cheap in China. That's why the American companies are rushing there to China, the European companies. Why can't we do that in Africa itself? Now, because China has now moved on with that advantage that they created. China managed to move 600 million people from poverty to middle income status. So China today has got the biggest middle income in the world today. But China is no longer the cheapest today. China's labor cost is no longer that low. There's a gap beyond there which Africa can fill. And Africa can use the same scenario to be able to also take off. You've got the youth, and African youth today is very dynamic. African youth. You should look at the social media. It's dominated by African youth. You see, this AI, African youth actually have been able to get a hold of AI, and they're very much into it. So what you need is basically create facilities for them, have connectivity.
Mr. Prime Minister, my question was, what are the young people telling you in terms of the uprising that you're seeing in Kenya and in Mozambique? My question wasn't on China or AI, respectfully. What are the young people telling you when you see the young people protesting, uprising in your country, in Mozambique? What are they telling you? It's not a question of how China has become advanced in the last 40 years or how AI will have an impact in our lives. But specifically, the question is, respectfully again, is what are you seeing, what are you feeling when you see young people do the uprising? We're beginning to see risking their lives and so many young people, Africans, dying in their own countries. Thank you.
Then, of course, I was trying to answer maybe in a longer way, but yes, it's not just Kenya or Mozambique. Political challenges exist virtually in all countries in the world. It's not only in Africa. You'll find demonstrations in Colombia. You will find the other time in France, they were burning tires on the streets in Paris, and so on and so forth. So every country has got its political challenges. It's not only in Africa. It is all over the world. And those political challenges can be resolved within those countries themselves. You need to address the issues that the youth are raising. Like in Kenya, they are talking about the cost of living. They're talking about unemployment in Kenya. They're talking about corruption. You see, they talk about ethnic discrimination, things like those. So those are challenges that can be resolved within the context of Kenyan society. The same thing in Mozambique. They're talking about the elections. Elections have just been held, and some people believe that they are probably not as transparent. That there was some kind of cheating, probably in the process of announcement of results. That happens in virtually every society. You saw it in the US the other time. People marching to the Congress, storming the Congress. So it is not only happening in Africa. It's happening all over the world, and there are solutions to those problems.
Thank you, thank you. And the very last question, let's have the gentleman there.
Right Honorable Dr. Raila Odinga, former Prime Minister, Republic of Kenya, and candidate of African Union chairmanship. I have an important question. How do you prioritize address African Continental Free Trade Area AFCATA implementation? How do you strengthen African voice in global governance and international relations? What's your approach to negotiating partnership with external actors such as the EU, China, and the US? How do you promote African interests in global forums like UN and G20? Regarding certain...
Sorry, I said one question at a time.
Okay,
thank you.
I need to add one question. How do you advance the implementation of the single African air transport market, SATM, to boost connectivity and economic integration? Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah, one is the African Free Trade Area agreement. This is now getting to be three years old, but it still has not had the impact that was required. The inter-African trade still has not moved much from 15%. As you know, the inter-European trade stands at 70%. Inter-Asian trade is at 50%. Even in terms of South American is over 30%. So we know the factors. One is the infrastructure. And this is something that we want to fast track so that we can have infrastructure opening up the borders across the continent. And secondly, the non-tariff barriers that have been imposed by member states of the continent. And this again is something that we need to address. As you know, there is a reform of the AU process which is ongoing. It was literally led by the president of Rwanda, Mr. Kagame. Kagame has written a report which has now been handed over to the new chair, President William Ruto of Kenya. And we were with President Ruto here 2 days ago when we talked to the diplomats here about these challenges and how these reforms can be carried out. If these reforms are carried out, they will enable the AU to deal with these issues, and we can be able to raise the inter-African trade from what it is today to 40%, which is what is being aimed at by 2030. It's the same thing now. It will then also help us in dealing with our other trading partners, that is the EU and also China and even the US. You see, US, you have got AGOA, which has been ongoing, and we think that we need to improve on AGOA. The EU, we also have been negotiating and scale up the negotiations so that the trade can be more fairer in favor of Africa. You see, for example, you take just a simple item, coffee. You see, coffee is produced primarily in Africa and in South America. But you find that the European country, I will not mention which one, earns more out of coffee than all these coffee-producing countries, Brazil and Africa, put together. So, because the auction center, it's not in Africa or South America, it is somewhere in Europe. How do you change this so that the African coffee producers can benefit? There are so many other things that we need to negotiate so that we get a fair deal on the international market generally. Thank you.
Thank you. I saw one last hand, and since not so many ladies have spoken, I see one across the room, please. Where is the microphone?
There's another one there.
Oh, there's one at the back. Okay.
No.
Okay, thank you very much.
Okay. I'll take the lady at the back, the lady here, and
Okay.
and one there. The lady, not the gentleman. The gentleman already spoke. 3 ladies.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. My questions are, as we all know that everybody...
Please introduce yourself and the media house.
Herman from the retirement 7.6 FM station in Addis.
I can see you. Can you show?
Can you try and stand this side so that the candidate at least can appreciate and see you?
Okay. shall I proceed? Okay, my questions are, the first one is, as we all know that there are many ongoing conflicts in Africa, especially DRC and the Sudan case. So what are we expect from Raila Odinga if you are selected as a chairperson? What are you going to do to solve and also to make sure that the peace and stability of the continent? What are you going to do on this? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yes, the conflicts not only in Africa, there's conflict all over the world. But you see, where there's conflict, there's a solution. Like you mentioned specifically the DRC, in eastern DRC, there's that conflict that has been going on for a long time. So conflicts which are internal, and the conflict which are, have got external actors and players. So you just need to find a way of bringing the protagonists to a negotiating table. You see, DRC issue did not start yesterday. It has been there for a long time. And some of us who have been long enough, have seen it and have actually sometimes we have been pained by what has been happening. So many innocent lives have been lost in the process of this conflict. It can be resolved, and in my view, it must be resolved. I have had the occasion to talk to the protagonists in this issue, and I've said that we can sit down and find a lasting solution to this problem. Right now, you've got interests left, right, and center. There's tension between the DRC, Rwanda, Uganda, and Kenya. We can resolve this issue by getting the major actors together to sit together and agree on a solution, in my view. So what we intend to do is to not to apportion blame, who is wrong, who is right. It is wrong for people to die, irrespective of who is responsible. So we need to sit down and find a lasting solution to this problem. You know that foreigners who are non-Africans are also involved because they have got vested interests in some of those conflicts. Some of them benefit from the chaos that exists there. So what we intend to do is not to apportion blame, but to address the solution to this issue. I'm sure we can find a solution. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
Okay, thank you. My name is Konje Zode. I'm working at the local television station. I think we are focusing on the peace and security of the continent as a woman, because women are the ones who are suffering out of this endless war throughout the continent. My focus also on the silencing the gun, which is the Agenda 2063 of the AUC. How do you address your measures to keep the gun silence throughout the continent? And also there are so many armed groups in Africa. What are you going to do with those groups which are creating war, disability, and displaced the societies where they are living and who create the problem across the continent? What measures are you going to take throughout your administration time? Thank you.
Yes, you also said that they say the guns will be silent by 2020, but they are not silent. They are still loud and speaking very loudly. Yes, I said when I was making my comment earlier here that you need to address the root causes of this problem in order to find a solution. You know, some of them is historical, some of them have got the roots on resource sharing, some of them are ethnic, some of them are cultural, some of them have got to do with the regions, regional conflicts, and so on. So what you need to do is to address the causative factors. What is it? Some of them to do with poverty in society. Some of them has to do with the lack of infrastructure. We have seen, for example, in Kenya, the areas where to go to the certain part of Kenya, you would have to have police escorts, escorting 100 vehicles, from police in front and police at the tail. It's how we could pass those areas. But when we put up infrastructure, proper highway, those areas, those bodies just disappeared. By opening up the country through infrastructure, it is a major solution to these problems. Because in areas where we see those gorillas running around, they are unreachable. And therefore they can commit crimes, kill people, and they cannot be reached. They know where to go and hide completely. So opening up the country is one of the solutions. Then secondly, creating wealth. First, putting up education facilities so that people can be able to go to school. And then bringing investment in the areas, bringing manufacturing unit factories in the area, putting up housing, modern housing in the regions and so on, open up those areas. So it is not something that we deal with just instantly, but it is a process. I'm sure that we can find a solution to, lasting solution to these problems generally. Okay?
Thank you. The final question on that table.
Thank you, Ms. Honorable. I'm coming from my own media, African Change, which is focused on youth in Africa. My questions are two. The first one is, as you know, Agenda 2063 is coming very faster. So about good governance, what are the measures that you have planned to do?
What do you understand is group?
Pardon, sir?
Repeat the question, please.
Okay. My first question is related to good governance. Agenda 2063, one of the team is bringing a good governance to Africa. So what is your plan to implement this in a very serious way, maybe abstaining state countries who are repeatedly participating in war or bringing the governments into